Warmest greetings to our learned and eminent resource persons and you esteemed listeners participating in this virtual conference on YouTube. I have the rare privilege of extending to all of you a warm welcome to the two-day virtual conference on education in the 21st century, adapting to a changing world, being held on the 1st and 2nd of June 2020. This conference is being held with the technical assistance, the Salesian College, Sonada, Darjeeling, Rusa Cell of St. Anthony's College, Shillong, Meghalaya, and the Don Bosco Media Network, Shillong, Meghalaya. I would like to invoke the presence of the Almighty as we begin this conference and to submit to Him the various sessions and elements of the conference, praying that He will choose to add His blessing to them so that they turn out to be a source of blessing for many. We invoke the Almighty through the Sanskrit prayer song, asking Him to send His light upon each one of us. There is not a single section and business in the world that has not been impacted negatively by the COVID-19 pandemic. Every structure known to many is crumbling down as we speak, and education, one of the world's foremost structure, is in danger of dying a slow and natural death. As academicians, educators, and teachers, we have decided to come together to find a way of addressing the need to keep education not only alive, but thriving despite the odds that are stacked against it. We have been greatly overwhelmed by the willingness of our resource persons to collaborate with us in a humble efforts to begin what we believe will be series of conversations and actions to bolster the work of education and to repurpose its tools and mediums. We have also been deeply encouraged by the more than 1,000 responses that we have received from people like you, teachers, research scholars, students, administrators, members of the public from other fields. In a special way, I would like to greet participants from India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and nations from the continent of Africa. This unprecedented situation that thrusts upon us calls us to adapt ourselves as teachers and administrators while still keeping to the vision and mission of our institutions. There are three aspects of this process of adaptation in the field of education that I would like to place before you, and these are innovations, integrity, and inclusions. Firstly, we need to innovate as much as we can so that we can continue to impart knowledge to our students through whatever means and mediums possible and available to us. The winds of change are blowing hard upon us now, and we need to decide how to respond to them. Part of innovation involves adapting digital online resources and technology, electronic gadgets, and network systems to create platforms on which education can be done effectively and efficiently. One thing that will greatly facilitate this is the willingness of the institutions and individuals to collaborate at a higher level in bringing together their expertise experience, and knowledge and resources. Secondly, much of what will happen in the days to come in the field of education will involve teachers and students working for the most part of the day from home through online platforms with very little scope for face-to-face interaction. To a large extent, education will have to evolve to embrace technology and the internet no longer as incidental to the teaching learning process, but primary to it. In such a scenario where teachers and students will engage in the teaching learning process in the freedom of their own homes, the only thing that will continue to ensure quality is integrity on the part of both communities to attend to their assigned tasks with responsibility and accountability. We need to explore ways of accomplishing this effectively. And finally, inclusion. By inclusion, I do not only mean to refer to those who are differently able or specially gifted or physically challenged, but also to those who belong to the poorer sections of the society, the marginalized, the neglected. Our textbooks, lectures, teaching aids should reflect our willingness and efforts to include everyone so that they have access to equal opportunities and support to learn and to be educated. We need to reorient our approach, attitude, and array of teaching styles to match the needs of students from these backgrounds. It is going to take a lot of hard work, brainstorming, policy changes, and implementation at the ground level. How do we as academicians, educators, and administrators address such issues appropriately in such an unprecedented time? It is my sincere hope that this virtual conference will provoke us to think, to act, and to engage constructively and productively with the issues confronting us. As I conclude, I would like to place on record my sincere gratitude our speakers, Reverend Father Dr. George Thadathil, Mrs. Hunfulla War, Ms. Anita Susan, Dr. Odeta Mendoza, Ms. Irilang Maulong. Our partners providing technical support, the Salesian College Sonada Darjeeling, West Bengal, Don Bosco Mediatek Shillong, Meghalaya, Rusa Cell, St. Anthony's College Shillong, Meghalaya. Our organizing team, Reverend Father Dr. Joby Joseph, the Rector of St. Anthony's College Shillong, Meghalaya, Mr. Jacob Shilla, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Coordinator of Rusa Cell, St. Anthony's College Shillong, Meghalaya, Mr. Nathaniel Mazau, Assistant Professor, Department of Mass Media, St. Anthony's College Shillong, the entire postgraduate Department of Education at St. Anthony's College Shillong, Meghalaya. Thank you for giving me a patient listening. I invite you all to enjoy the lectures and to feel free to leave your feedback, ideas, suggestions in the comments section. If you would like to pose your questions and have any doubts clarified, please do so by emailing them to the email IDs of the resource persons provided in their profile, and the resource person will respond to you. Jai Hind, evermore, better ever.
It is indeed a commendable work that St. Anthony's College, Principal, Department of Education, and the entire academic community has launched in holding a seminar online in these times on education in the 21st century, adapting to this changing world that we are all day in and day out witnessing. I would like to begin by taking a cue from the foremost spiritual leader in the world, along with all others of similar mind who bring before us what this change entails. And I refer here to our Pope Francis. He invites the entire world, especially the political leadership and leaders in industry, to look at this event of COVID-19 and the pandemic that we are in as an occasion not to return back to our old world. And I think he sets the tone in that sense of what it means to be preparing for a new world. And he set some guidelines. And I think in this he is in one mind and heart with our own father of the nation, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. We all remember how he said that when you are uncertain as to what to do, think of the least person, the most suffering individual whose face that you have seen, and then you choose what it is that you ought to do. And none of us can deny that these days the migrants walking from one state to another, from one industrial city to their own home village, trudging, looking for water, looking for food, looking for transport, those crying faces, those solemn feet, we can't ever forget that. And it's not one or two, it's in millions. And my dear friends, that therefore is what Pope is asking us. Are we gearing ourselves for a new world that looks at the common good? Act so that the common welfare is taken note of. Act in such a way that we work towards removing inequalities, healing injustices, and knowing fully well that we have only one common home, this earth, and we are all one single family, and therefore gearing ourselves for post-COVID world means investing in clean and renewable energy, investing and respecting the environment, and abandoning the industry of weapons. He is so emphatic, and repeatedly in a number of his speeches he has made this point. What is the point of amassing weaponry? And what kind of a world are we wanting to create? Instead, ought not we to be investing that resource in order to prevent from these kind of events ever recurring in this millennium? And I think that puts the tenor, and that offers us the vision for what we ought to be gearing ourselves for. Having said that, we are being challenged, I think, in these times to be very pragmatic and observe what's happening in the world at large and in our own country. And I think those of us in higher education, we have a special responsibility to ensure that we work towards retaining the legacy of democracy that we have attained. Think of nearly 100 years of effort in our own country and what our freedom fighters and the fathers and mothers of our nation have worked and hammered into after much debate in the Constituent Assembly to create a vision for an ideal India in our Constitution. And therefore we have a responsibility to preserve that. And we know what's happening on the other hand. The number of countries that are democratic are decreasing day by day. And those so-called oldest democracies and largest democracies are also on many indicators deteriorating in being a democracy. And I think this is a challenge that is facing us. Which means when we are looking at rethinking and looking at adapting ourselves to this world that is changing, we are asking ourselves, are we prepared to reinvest in preserving an egalitarian world? Are we ready to stand for the weak and the poor? Are we ready, in and through our education, to prepare and to continue with the social change that we deserve and we need to bring about? And in doing this, of course, coming to where we are in higher education, therefore, how are we going to look at the changes that are already happening in a way? For example, here we are in a conference, but with technology. Now, are we being victims of technology, or are we at the mercy of technology, or is technology just a tool for us? And this brings me to what Giorgio Agamben just the other day was writing about. Are universities, therefore, selling themselves to these so-called digital companies or ICT enabled teaching that has been behind us, or that we have been in a way in for various legitimate reasons? Now, what's going to be our position with our digital learning? Today's editorial in the paper, Maya John writes about the decision that the Delhi University has taken of going for online examinations. So where does that leave those students that have broken phones, or those students located in places where they have no steady electricity or internet connectivity? So this is a crucial question for us. And therefore, he says that, he goes to the extent of comparing the situation in 1931 when, people supported the kind of fascism with the kind of decision that universities are making today in going en masse in one unidirection. So I think what we are looking at is, and what we ought to be looking at is, how do we preserve the human and the personal dimension of what education is about and what education ought to be. And I think this is a challenge that is facing us. We definitely got to abandon the factory model of education, and 21st century, with the opportunities that we have, with the use of technology, there's a lot of opportunity for personalization and smart use of technology for education. And this is definitely the challenge before us of presenting to our students and our young people that we are here ready to support them. Let me present before you some of our local stories. In our campus, for example, we said let's offer a 90% scholarship to those with 90% or above marks that they are coming into the system. And then we thought, okay, this year with the kind of the situation, why not give them, phones, smartphones? And this thought came to me because I do take a class, and I came to know of a student not coming online for these sessions because she has to share her own smartphone with her younger brother in school. So there's a kind of demand on the phone and the time that they can use. But then comes the question, would a parent prefer a kind of a scholarship and financial assistance to students who are coming into our campus, or enabling them to choose, than giving them a phone or a tablet? And we know the case of the famous Agash tablet project of the government, and with the IITs of Rajasthan and Mumbai involved in it, and how that didn't take off. Or even the project of giving one laptop for each student didn't take off. Experiments that were done between 2009 and 15, and of which there are studies that have come out in the latest Economic and Political Weekly. So I think the point is that how do we empower parents to make choice? How do we empower students to make choice with the kind of resources that they have in order to make this transition? And to the extent that we accompany them and journey with them, I think we are fulfilling part of our task. And all of us do know when it comes to the ground realities, and that check with the ground reality is what also Maya John was referring to, is how do we motivate students? Initial phase, now we are into the third month. They thought it's just a short term and let's relax and let's have a holiday. And all our faculty telling me that those students who have been very attentive in class are also very eager in the online mode of teaching learning. So motivating students and being with parents, I think these are crucial issues for us in terms of meeting the challenges at the grassroots, at the local, at the personal level, when we say that we need to adjust and adapt to a new situation. Now, on a larger canvas, I want to take you to, why this concern? Or, in other words, the why of where we find ourselves, the why of where we got to be going, and of course, the implications of the change. I guess all of us agree, and we know the deteriorating condition of our planet Earth, the rainforest being decimated, our own forests and dwellings where there are tribal communities, or where there are water resources in the northeast region that we are located, the kind of water lobby and the dams that are being planned all across the rivers of Arunachal Pradesh. So there is a kind of clamor for the resources taken from locations and from people, and where does it go? So I think this kind of a displacement of resources and wealth, and as a result of which creation of disparity, is behind us asking these more fundamental questions as to where we are and where we ought to be going. How do we, as I started by saying, contribute and work towards retaining the egalitarian situation, or the devolution of wealth that the previous decade had achieved? And what has happened in the recent past with the kind of economy due to various interventions where we have reached. Now, let me also try to put this in perspective by looking at these kind of changes that we are facing, or when we say we got to adapt to a new world. This again we should remember, my dear friends, is nothing new. We are not the first ones who have adapted to new situations. Think of those times, for example, when people just learnt by learning by heart, because there was no written text. There was no writing, there was no pencil, there was not even palm leaves. So knowledge went just from, the know-how that people developed, hands-on training, and from generation to generation it was passed on. So that kind of unrecorded history of the human world is much larger than, let's say, our past 3,000, 4,000 years of written records and history. So that was a huge change. As Noah Harari will tell us in his Homo Deus and Homo sapiens book of the history of the humankind, the transition from the hunter-gathering to the agrarian civilizational setup. Or even in our own country, the kind of change from, let's say, the Brahminic mode of education, or even, the Buddhist style of sanghas and the learning that took place, or the mode of living that happened in Rajgir and in those early Buddhist councils, where there was the earliest expressions of democratic living, and the Buddhist community itself as an expression of common living. And how that, with the arrival of the Gupta age, in a way gets decimated, even before, long before the arrival of, let's say, Islam, to which sometimes the decimation of Buddhist culture in India has been, I would say, wrongly attributed. So transitions of this nature have happened, and I mentioned about this when I take, for example, how Kalidasa wrote Abhijnana Shakuntalam, and the transition that he himself in his writing makes from the first chapter of the book to the last. You know. So we have, as a culture and as a people, undergone, when we look historically, similar kind of transitions from Mughal to the arrival of the colonial setup, the British, and even the colonial impact, colonialism and its impact itself deserves a retake. I wouldn't, for example, go along with Shashi Tharoor's kind of, indictment of all that happened during the last 200 years. I think we are forgetting a whole lot of aspects of how change happened and how changes came about, and how and who all, even those who decry today, or their grandfathers or great grandfathers, were complicit in the kind of situation that was brought about. We grant the rectitude of thinking to them as we grant to the efforts that are being made today. So that's historically, when we take a wider, long range sweep of things, we find things have happened even before, and we have the ability to adapt. Sociologically, looking at these kind of changes too is significant for us, because the life and the mode in which the life has been lived, how communities interacted, how societies and social groups interacted in various centuries. I think this kind of a diachronic look at any given time, a kind of synchronic sweep that we can have of the social setup is another factor that we ought to take to account. So in other words, what I am trying to say is that we have had ideal setups, or at least an attempt to create an ideal. And what for us is the ideal? Are we, when we say we envisage an ideal setup of society, does that include explicitly, implicitly, and per se the fact that every individual is valued? So which means we can't get around to a kind of situation where you say you are discreditable, discardable. And I think this is the saddest part of what probably Pope and Gandhi already long ago cautioned us about. Do we really value every person? And if education is not bringing us to that point of saying that I value my brother and my sister just as I value my life, and therefore am willing to sacrifice everything, and I think then all of our education and our adapting to a new world doesn't make sense. So this kind of egalitarian social setup, where a democratic social setup, where we do value the republic, we do value the states, the federal setup, we do value each linguistic group, each ethnic group, each tribal community that comprises this Indian nation is and ought to be uppermost in our rethinking for a new education. Now coming to the political kind of transitions that is calls for, and this again is what Pope Francis has been hitting hard and reminding, and even to the extent of kissing the feet of political leaders, and we have seen that happening in Africa when he was there, requesting and pleading with them not to fight. Let's overcome conflicts. Let's try to accommodate differences. Imagine what good we can do, India and China, instead of fighting over border boundaries, if we could truly make, as someone said, the dragon and the elephant dancing, embracing together. And I think not only, why only China and India, all the nations, whether they are within the SARC countries, a small country or a big country, acknowledging everyone, whether it is a Bhutan, whether it is a Nepal, whether it is Bangladesh, whether it is Myanmar, all of our neighbors, and in this region, if we can work towards a kind of political, cohesive, co-living and a thinking and an acting, both at the bureaucratic and at the political decision making, a synchronous manner, creating synergy, then I think we as educationists and as educational establishments are doing our right task. Now let me come to the how. If we have a why to this adapting to new situation, of this 21st century as we are entering into the third decade. How are we going to adapt? Here again, I think we have reached a situation where we cannot but live with technology. It's a question of, I think the time for saying are we for or against technology is forgone. Only thing is we can still ask, are we being driven by technology or are we driving the technology? So whether it was, to what extent and to what purpose are we using the nuclear energy? The same question applies to the kind of technology, especially in education, the educational investment in technology that we are talking about. I think if we want to adapt to this changing world, and if we want to look at adjusting and adapting to this new situation, I see three things that we ought to be doing. One, the technology factor, where it is seen as an innovation tool that is attractive, that is modern, that brings information from all across the world, and learning systems have changed, the role of libraries have changed, the access to information for students have changed, the mode of research has changed, and in all of this, a lot of good things have happened. And we know how, I for one can say how our entire academic community has been brought together, even in these times, because we know whether a student is okay or not, whether a faculty is able to connect with his or her students or not. We have the means, or whether it is through WhatsApp, whether it is through our own learning management system based on the backup of our own ERP, the Moodle system that we are using. So there's a way in which one can know at the end of the day, yes, this faculty, this department, they and the students together are at it. Now, it's not going back to what Agamben said, as being subservient to technology, or as what Shoshana Zuboff very rightly said in her entire study, just come out recently last year, of surveillance capitalism. On the one side, we can't deny the fact that whatever we do in the internet world is being recorded. So in that sense, she definitely identifies this global fascism that is right now in control, and they are using this pandemic situation to get even more data, not only about your preferences with regard to the type of mobile that you would like to online purchase, or your preference for your washing machine or your kitchenette, but now they are going to get the data of your body with the kind of measurements and the calculations and the temperature readings that will happen, the kind of security to the extent of whether you are allowed to travel internationally or from one state to another or even one district to another. Now all this data being pooled together is going to be used in order to control, and in that sense we are moving towards a high level of fascist autocratic kind of situation is on the one side. It's not that we are unaware of it. Yet the other ground reality is, how do we give hope to a student who is, let's say, in this situation of not being called to action or motivated to action, choosing maybe just to sleep the whole day, or to watch movies the whole day, or to get dissipated for various reasons? So I think we have here a tough choice to make. And it's a matter, as Pope is saying, as Gandhi is saying, are we concerned about that individual? And whatever be the resource that is going to help, we latch onto it, we get on. So I think in that sense, I for one believe that we need technology, and we use that as a teaching, learning tool in order to provide motivation to the students and to draw the best from the teacher. So I see happening these days that the faculty themselves are learning. So one can't afford to say, I am not tech savvy, or I don't believe in these kind of things. I believe only in face-to-face interaction. Yes, we all do in the value of face-to-face interaction. But that doesn't prevent us from saying that let me, during this while, also try to learn how to design a course online and how to make it as attractive as possible for a student who will access. So that the whole concept of the edutainment, that okay, you learn, but you also learn it in a very interactive way, you also learn it in a very entertaining manner, and in the process you also get to know what your other students or others think like. So I have seen this happening. A student telling me, Father, I learnt when we did that talk show reporting much more about the subject than when I only read the notes that you had sent. So when 2 or 3 students are able to share, even over the phone, their thoughts, they are contributing and they are to each other's learning strategies. So and this way, the third factor, so the technology factor, the teaching learning factor, and most important, the interaction and rapport factor. So no learning, especially in our Don Bosco system, to which both Salesian College and St. Anthony's Shillong belong, we believe that the heart of education is in attending to the heart. So whatever be the means, whether it is playing in the playground or playing video game together, are we able to connect? And if we are able to connect with the student, we have started educating that student. So I think this is what takes us to looking at the last part of my presentation. When we say we are adapting to changing world, we can look at it how the administration of educational institution is adapting, which means the management. For example, what type of learning management system are you going to use? Every other day we have one or the other company calling up, and we went in for this Moodle just because we are not subservient to any one company. We have built on what our own computer science department and our tech team has developed, whether it is for office management, whether it is for faculty and student relationship, or for even for conducting of examinations, if that were to be done. So in this way, I am sitting here in Sonada, 6,400 feet in the eastern Himalayan mountains, and you all are, some of you, listening to me from Shillong. But at the end of the day, I know what my 1,754 students have done, what all courses they are participating in, all just under one umbrella, as it were. So this kind of non-threatening, non-invasive, to the extent it is possible, and economically viable, because hosted on our server, and it is an open source software. So I don't need to be. At the same time, we look at what others are doing. Even yesterday, 2 of our faculty participated in a Xavier Board organized training seminar on what edifiers are trying to offer. So we compare and contrast. But if we have already our own system, then we take something, whatever comes from outside, to the extent that we need it. Similarly to faculty. So they are also being invited to adapt to this new situation. Students are adapting to this situation, and we are also trying to call up, for example, and we all ought to be knowing. Suppose a student has suddenly disappeared from the network and no one is able to trace. Of course, we have in the office record of the parent, just counter check what actually is happening. Of course, primary concern again, health, safety, and then if you are safe and if you are home, how are you keeping yourself busy? Why not also do some learning activity? So here is where I think a very pragmatic approach to and a very contextual approach to this situation takes us to. And in conclusion, therefore, what I would like to emphasize is that what's the world like in non-ideal times? What kind of a world do we want to be living in? A world in which there is hope, a world in which we have the resilience, even if my next door neighbor is under home quarantine. How do I reach out to support that and continue with my work? If I find there are migrant workers returning back to the village where we are located, how do we offer succor to them to the extent that we can, or coordinate that? And our NSS and a whole lot of most of our campuses, we are reaching out, and that so the hope, resilience to this situation, now that we can meet this challenge as well. And this comes, my dear friends, and here is where I would like to leave us all. It comes from the belief that truth will triumph.